The Soviet Union was a land of secrets, a place where the iron fist of the state controlled every narrative. But in the heart of the Ural Mountains, a group of 10 young adventurers were preparing to write their own story. Led by the brilliant and disciplined Igor Dyatlov, these were not ordinary students. They were elite mountaineers, trained in the harshest conditions Russia could offer. Their goal was Otorjing Mountain, a name that in the local Mansi language carries a chilling warning: don't go there. Among them was Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old war veteran with mysterious links to the KGB, and 7 other bright minds, including engineers and physics students. The journey began with laughter and songs, captured in the grainy black and white photographs they left behind. But destiny had other plans. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member, fell ill and was forced to turn back early. As he hugged his friends goodbye in the tiny outpost of Vizhai, he was unknowingly embracing them for the last time. He would become the sole survivor of a ghost mission. For days, the remaining 9 tracked through the blinding white abyss, battling winds that could strip the skin from a man's face. On February 1st, they reached the slopes of Kholat, Syakhl, the dead mountain. Instead of retreating to the safety of the trees, they decided to pitch their tent on the exposed, frozen slope. It was a decision that defied logic for such experienced hikers. They ate their final meal, a simple dinner of ham and crackers, and settled in for the night. Within hours, the mountain would claim them in a way that continues to baffle the world's greatest scientists. Back in civilization, the families of the hikers waited for a telegram that never arrived. By February 20th, the silence had turned into a screaming alarm. A massive search operation was launched, involving student volunteers, the Soviet military, and local Mansi trackers. For 6 agonizing days, they scoured the jagged peaks until February 26th, when a searcher spotted a dark, collapsed speck on the snow-covered slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was the tent. But as the rescuers approached, the air grew heavy with a sense of unnatural dread. The scene at the tent was the first sign that this was no ordinary hiking accident. The tent was half buried in snow, but it hadn't been crushed from the outside. Forensic analysis would later prove it had been slashed open with a knife from the inside. It was as if something or someone had terrorized the group so completely that they didn't even have time to use the zipper. Inside, their warm coats, their survival boots, and their cameras were still neatly placed. In the Russian winter, your boots are your life. To leave them behind is to accept a death sentence. And yet, leading away from the tent and down toward the forest were 9 sets of footprints. Some were barefoot. Others were wearing a single sock. They weren't running in a panic. The track suggested a calm, synchronized walk into the pitch-black darkness of a -30-degree night. What force could make 9 people walk toward their certain death without their shoes? Nearly a mile down the slope, at the edge of the ancient forest, the first bodies were discovered. Under a massive cedar tree, rescuers found Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonoshenko. They were dressed only in their underwear, their skin covered in a strange orange tint. Their hands were charred with burns, suggesting they had held them directly in a small fire, unable to feel the heat because their nerves were already frozen. Most disturbing of all, the branches of the cedar tree were broken up to 5 meters high. The bark was torn off, and forensic evidence suggested the men had used their bare hands and teeth to climb the tree, even as their skin peeled away in the cold. What were they looking for? Were they trying to see if the tent was safe to return to, or were they watching something stalking them from the shadows? Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. They were spread out in the snow, their frozen fingers clutching the ice, pointing toward the tent. It appeared they were trying to crawl back to their only shelter in their final moments. Initially, the doctors declared they had died of hypothermia, but as the investigation moved further into the woods, the tragedy shifted from a survival accident into a dark, inexplicable nightmare that the Soviet government immediately tried to bury. It took another 2 months to find the final 4 hikers. In May, as the heavy snows began to melt, searchers discovered a ravine further into the forest. Buried under 4 meters of ice were the remains of Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignol, and Kolovatov. These were the bodies that shattered the avalanche theory. Unlike their friends, these 4 had suffered brutal internal trauma. Nikolai Thibaut Brignol's skull had been crushed by a force so immense it was equivalent to a high-speed car crash. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubinina had dozens of broken ribs, their chests caved in by a massive pressure. Yet here was the impossibility. There were no external bruises. There were no marks on the skin. Their bones had been shattered from the inside by a force that didn't even break the fabric of their clothes. And then came the detail that turned this into a horror story. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue and her eyes. Zolotaryov was also found with empty eye sockets. While some officials argued that local scavengers or decomposition were to blame, the surrounding soft tissues were perfectly preserved. To the families who saw the bodies, this was not the work of nature. These hikers were victims of a compelling natural force that the KGB refused to explain. Why were they also wearing scraps of clothing taken from the dead bodies of their friends back at the cedar tree? It was a desperate struggle for survival against a predator they couldn't see. As the case files were gathered, the anomalies grew more terrifying. Forensic scientists tested the clothing of the hikers and found traces of high-level radioactive contamination. Where does a group of students in a remote mountain range find radiation? Even more bizarre were the reports from a second group of hikers camping 50 miles away on that same night. They reported seeing strange, glowing orange orbs hovering in the sky over Kholat Syakhl. These orbs moved silently, dancing over the peaks before disappearing into the clouds. Was this a secret Soviet weapon test? The region was known to be a testing ground for ballistic missiles and parachute mines. Witnesses at the hikers' funerals reported that their skin had turned a deep burnt orange color and their hair had turned prematurely gray. If these young people had accidentally witnessed a secret military operation, the government's subsequent behavior makes perfect sense. The investigation was abruptly shut down, the files were classified as top secret, and the entire mountain range was banned for public access for years. The hikers weren't just victims of the cold, they were collateral damage in a Cold War secret that was too dangerous to be revealed. If it wasn't the military, what else could it be? For decades, the local Mansi people have spoken of the Menkwi, the Siberian Yeti. Legend says these massive territorial creatures haunt the dead mountain, protecting it from outsiders. Could a creature with superhuman strength have crushed the hikers' ribs without breaking their skin? One of the hikers, Semyon Zolotaryov, was found holding his camera. Could he have captured a photo of their killer? But science offers an even more terrifying explanation: infrasound. Scientists believe that the unique saddle shape of Kholat Syakhl creates a phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex street. When the wind hits the mountain at a specific angle, it creates low-frequency sound waves called infrasound. These waves are silent to the human ear, but they trigger intense, uncontrollable feelings of dread, nausea, and madness. Could a perfect storm of infrasound have struck the tent, making the hikers believe they were being attacked? Could it have driven them to cut their way out and walk blindly into the night, their brains literally vibrating with a fear they couldn't explain? It would explain the walk, but it still leaves the radioactive clothes and the orange orbs as a haunting mystery. There is a theory that this wasn't a hiking trip at all. Some researchers suggest that Semyon Zolotaryov and 2 other members were undercover agents on a controlled delivery mission. They were allegedly carrying radioactive samples to meet foreign spies in the mountains to uncover their identities. If the meeting went wrong, or if they were intercepted by a rival Soviet agency, the result would be exactly what we see: a brutal forensic cleanup. The missing eyes and tongues could have been a gruesome way to remove evidence of specific chemical exposure. The military's presence at the site before the searchers arrived, the missing diary pages, and the forged autopsy reports all point to a massive state cover-up. The Soviet Union could not afford to have its military secrets or its internal spy wars revealed on the world stage. For the state, the lives of 9 students were a small price to pay for the security of their nuclear secrets. They were erased from history, their deaths attributed to a vague force of nature to keep the world from looking too closely at the dead mountain. In 2020, under immense public pressure, the Russian government reopened the Dyatlov Pass case. Their final conclusion? A slab avalanche. But for those who have seen the photos of the footprints and the broken ribs, that answer is an insult to the memory of the 9. The hikers of the Dyatlov Pass were not just victims, they were heroes of the human spirit who fought until their very last breath against a force we may never fully understand. Today, a lonely monument stands on the pass bearing the faces of the 9 who never came home. They look out over the frozen wasteland, forever guarding the secret of what happened on that terrifying night in 1959. As the wind howls through the Ural Mountains, it carries the echo of their story, a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, and some mountains are truly dead. I am Aljaneb, and this is GriotVibe. Sleep well, if the mountain allows it.